Hello and welcome back to my channel. With me, I have a very interesting video of Jen Elliott. But before we get into the video, please subscribe, like, and don't forget to share your thoughts on what you think about this video. Now, in this video, Jen Elliott talks about a book, Death or Birth, where people have to realize that in this country, America, a lot of palm color people are scared to death because they know that within 30 years, palm color people would have lost their numerical majority in the United States of America. Now, this book literally highlights how scared palm color people are when it comes to black people taking over. This is seen by what this book says about what white people have to do in order for them to not lose their numerical majority, because they feel there are a few palm color babies born in this country, this making them feel like this is a threat or something which needs to be solved as soon as possible. Now, she talks about a lot of interesting things. This is really a must watch, so without wasting much time, let's get into the video. I will be right back.
If you haven't read Ben Wattenberg's book, The Birth Dearth, you need to realize that in this country right now, we've got a whole lot of white folks who are scared to death because they know that within 30 years, white people will have lost their numerical majority in the United States of America. And if you haven't read that book, in which he says, the biggest problem confronting this country today is there are too few white babies being born in this country. If we don't solve this problem and solve it quickly, white people will lose their numerical majority, and this will no longer be a white man's land. Now I know a whole lot of Native American people, of First Nations people, who don't think this is a white man's land. They think it's he says there are three things we can do to solve this problem. Number one, we can pay women to have babies, as they have been doing in Western European nations for years. Then he says, unfortunately, and these are his words, not mine, unfortunately, we would have to pay women of all colors to have babies, so we don't want to do that. Now, this man was a member of the American Enterprise Institute, an ultra-conservative right-wing think tank, and gave advice to presidents of the United States. He says the second thing we could do is increase the number of legal immigrants allowed into this country every year. Then he says, unfortunately, the majority of people who want to come to this country today are people of color, so we don't want to do that. He says the third thing we could do, and this is really scary, is realize that 60% of the fetuses that are aborted every year in this country are white. If we could keep that 60% alive, that would solve our birth dearth. Now, how many of you think that sounds like blatant, overt racism? People, you need to know that the attempt to get rid of my right or any other woman's right to have an abortion is not about religion, it is not about morality, it is about keeping white people in the numerical majority in this country, and you better realize that's what's happening. They're trying to outlaw abortion. They're trying to tell women once again what they can do with their bodies. If a woman has to be punished for by getting pregnant, whether or not she wants to, has to be punished by bearing that child, then the person who contributed to that unwanted pregnancy has to be held responsible for too. So I think there's a, hey, wait, don't waste my time. There's a perfectly logical remedy for this problem. Any male who contributes to an unwanted pregnancy must submit to involuntary vasectomy so that he cannot contribute to another unwanted pregnancy. Now, people, you need to know that vasectomy takes only a few minutes in the doctor's office. It isn't very painful. My husband's vasectomy didn't hurt me at all. Now, you also need to realize that vasectomy is reversible. Motherhood is not reversible. Once you're a mother, you are a mother for as long as you live. That's the way it is. Even if you give that child up for adoption, you still hear that child crying in the night, and you wonder how he or she is getting along. People, vasectomy is reversible. Young males could have a vasectomy and have a lot of fun without a whole lot of responsibility, and then when they want to produce a child, when they want to contribute to a wanted pregnancy, then they could have that vasectomy reversed. How many of you think that would be a logical conclusion to this problem? Now some of you are going to say, she doesn't like men. Oh, yes, I do. I don't dislike men. Boy, I do. However, you need to know, I don't dislike men. Some of my best friends are men. How many of you have heard something like that before? Somebody has said denial is not just a river in Egypt. In this country today, we are in deep denial about the fact that we are deeply racist. We are teaching racism in the schools on a daily basis, and if you haven't read Nathan Rutstein's book, The Racial Conditioning of Our Children, you need to get it and read it. This man knew what he was talking about. Now, somebody said this morning, he did, well, Jane came here in a sweatshirt. Yes, I came here in a sweatshirt, people, because I'm working, number one. Number two, this thing says exactly what I believe. Racism, prejudice is an emotional commitment to ignorance. Now, the problem with white people is not white innocence. Somebody this week has called it, in a book has called it white innocence. It's not white innocence, and it's not white privilege. It's white ignorance. And until white people get educated to the fact that they are not superior because of the lack of melanin in their skin, that's how long we'll have this problem. And we could don't do that. I've got more to say. We could change this problem if we would start educating instead of indoctrinating in the schools. We are indoctrinating children instead of educating them.
What I want to do is, he talked about the structures of racism. You have been doing this work for 50 years.
But he's been living this for 50 years.
He has been living this
There's
for 50
a big difference. Yes. I can talk about it because I don't have to live it. You have to live it. You need to understand that my heroes, and don't ever call me a heroine because that's not what I am. My heroes are black women. Black women keep on keeping on regardless of all the obstacles we put in their paths. And I don't just say this to you because you're a largely black audience. I say this to every audience that I talk to. You have to realize that you were here first and you will be here last. Because us white folks are going to go out in the sun and it's going to get worse and worse because and we're going to die of melanoma. So you will be here long after we're gone. You are going to be the majority in this country very, very shortly. So get ready for it, because you're going to you think you've been abused before. Wait until you get the power, that you have the power to do what you choose to do. And that's the problem. White folks are scared to death that if people of color get power, they're going to want to do to us what we have done to them. Now, how many of you want to get even with all white folks? How many of you want to get even with one or two? Yeah. All we white folks have to do is work very, very hard to be sure that we aren't the one you want to get even with. What we do in the present constructs the future.
That's right.
Blacks are not responsible for the past. Whites are not responsible for the past. We are all responsible for what we do in the present to construct the future for our children and our grandchildren. And stop that. We don't have time for that. You need to know that as far as I'm concerned, we're all related. We're 30th to 50th cousins, every person in this room. You are all related to me. Now, you might not like being related to me, but you are. You are my relatives, and I will not tolerate having my relatives abused because of somebody else's ignorance about skin color. And that's what we're talking about in this country.
Right.
Now, in the struggle for racial justice, it's time to pay more attention to the fears of palm-colored people. In a white-dominated world that may seem counterintuitive, in the racial arena, what do palm-colored people have to be afraid of? Now, understanding the fears behind the racial politics of both conservative and liberal whites can help guide strategy for changing a society in which wealth and well-being are still tied to race. And make no mistake, there's still a racialized gap between white and non-white American on measures of wealth and well-being. Income, home ownership, graduation rates, access to healthcare, infant mortality, etc. In fact, the gap between palm-colored people and black Americans on some of these measures is greater today than in the immediate aftermath of the major legislative achievements of the civil rights movement. And on some measures, the rate of improvement is so glacial that it will be decades, if not centuries, before we reach equality. Now, the legislative achievements that ended legal apartheid in America were a great victory, but the economic apartheid that remains is a reminder of the failures. But bluntly, there United States abolished a formal apartheid system but remained a WS society. After more than a decade of writing and speaking about these issues, which has sparked lots of feedbacks from all political angles, I think this is what we can conclude about white people and their fears. For conservative white people, the dominant fear is of somebody living without the privilege that comes with whiteness. Polite conservatives defend the primacy of Western civilization. More reactionary whites are openly artistic about the threat that non-white peoples pose to all of life. Now, both versions defend the existing distribution of wealth and power, even though many of the working class and poor palm color who endorse such views have access to precious little wealth or power. Race is used by palm color elites today, just as it was in the nation's formative years, to drive a wedge between people who would otherwise come together to challenge those elites. The racial demographic shift occurring in many Western countries provides a unique context to study the reactions of a high-power group, the palm color people, to the potential loss of their privileged position in society. Now, 3 experiments conducted in Canada, the US, and the UK showed that palm color people who are reminded about the ongoing demographic changes and who see race relations as a zero-sum game whereby any gains by minorities must come at the expense of the majority, experience stronger collective angst and to a lesser extent fear but not anger. In turn, collective angst but not the other negative group-based emotions fuels their motivation to protect the existing intergroup hierarchy by withdrawing support for progressive social movements and increases anti-immigration sentiments, down-regulating the existential threat experienced by palm color majorities in the face of a racial demographic shift may be one way to reduce acrimonious behavioral intentions aimed at preserving their place in the social hierarchy. Now, in August 2008, the Census Bureau released a report that predicted a seismic shift in American demographics. By 2050, minorities would make up to more than 50% of the population and become the majority. Now, when Yale psychologist Jennifer Richardson heard about the report on NPR, she remembers thinking this probably freaking somebody out. By somebody, she means palm color people. Now, Richardson's studies on interracial interactions had taught her that when people are in the majority, the sense of their race is dormant, but the prospect of being in the minority can suddenly make palm color identity and all the historical privilege that comes with it salient. And she guessed the prospect of losing majority status was likely to make people perhaps unconsciously uneasy. One might expect the white perceivers would be motivated to create a larger, more inclusive white category to bolster their numeric majority as a response to demographic changes. However, there's much evidence to suggest that white decision makers may in fact feel a motivation to narrow their perception of whiteness in order to preserve white status. For example, the assignment of mixed race individuals to their socially subordinate racial group, according to hypodescent, has long been associated with bolstering of palm color status and the subjugation of minorities. The notorious one-drop rule banks in 1998. Indeed, hypodescent emerged in law in the US to reinforce the high status of palm color slavers by protecting the purity of whiteness from racial mixing. More recently, hypodescent has been associated with a desire among palm color people to preserve the status quo hierarchy with the white category on top. Now, this historical and recent empirical evidence suggests hypodescendant race categorization as a powerful tool for maintaining palm color status. Now, in the racial conditioning of our children, ending psychological G-side in our schools, Nathan Rothstein takes the lead of the box. He also shows educators and parents how to jump out, lift children outside and throw the box away. Now, this is a book that can change the lives of children, the atmosphere of the schools, the unaliving of tender spirits, the very hearts of caring educators and parents the world over. This has been an interesting video, so kindly share what you think about Jen Elliott's video. Thank you for watching and see you in my next video.